Okie dokie, folks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ray Slager, and I'm from Yahara Software. I'd like to welcome you to our conversation today, Smarter Tech, Stronger Teams, Making Innovation Work for Your Fleets. Couple of quick notes. As you are watching, feel free to submit your questions via the chat and Q&A features for our speakers to address. Today's presentation will be recorded, and a copy will be shared with all of you. And at the end, you'll be prompted to fill out a quick survey. Please take a minute to do so to help us continue to produce great educational content like today's presentation. I would like to welcome you to today's speakers, Rusty Weiss and Steve Wilhelms. Rusty Weiss from Yahara Software is a seasoned veteran of the transportation industry, focused on integrating client systems to automate tasks, monitor system performance, optimize reports, and enable efficient management by measurement. He is an expert consultant on successful adoption and utilization of driver performance monitoring and feedback systems, and is currently focused on helping fleets improve MPG, utilizing data that is already present combined with highly efficient and effective coaching. Joining Rusty, we've got Steve Wilhelms. Steve is the Chief Operating Officer at DQID and a transportation industry expert with over 25 years of safety and risk management expertise. He has developed proven safety programs by analyzing data and industry trends and is recognized as a top expert in CSA. Steve holds multiple safety certifications and serves in leadership roles with the American Trucking Association, Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, and Texas Trucking Association. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Steve and Rusty.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Rusty. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, take time in your busy schedule, talk about ways. I like the topic today that you suggested for us, and I think we can absolutely overwhelm, perhaps not think of our client, our frontline folks, when bringing in technology to solve kind of higher level, strategic company goals, etc. There is that spot where the rubber meets the road, and I think that's kind of the expertise you're bringing to the conversation. Is that down the right path?
Absolutely. Fleet managers and dispatchers, well, everybody in trucking. I mean, from the or driver trainers and all that. I mean, they have so much data and different responsibilities that come across their desk, their computer, their email, their phone, just wherever, right? And so, I mean, one of the things that I've learned in being part of the compliance side and part of the tech side is, there's this lurking question: is that how can fleets ensure that everyone is on the same page, from the C-suite down to relaying, discussions and decisions down to the driver and the driving force? But how can they do that? How can they use data to do that and make sure they're getting relevant data?
Very good. I think too, in my past experiences, I've noticed that leadership that comes up through the ranks, that you don't have to twist their arm too hard for them to contemplate the impact on the frontline folks. In fact, it may have been frustration they felt in the front lines that motivated them to look, when that management, that leadership position was posted, one of those leaders that steps up and says, I can help us do better, and I can represent that front side, as opposed to other leadership roles that maybe come in and bring in expertise that's critical for the business, but lack the frontline experience. And I think that's a vulnerability those leaders, that's my type of leadership, in the space, is technical experience, process experience, business experience. But have I ever driven, Class 8? No. So I need to be totally aware of that vulnerability, open my ears, right?
Oh, absolutely. And and with that, data can be interpreted in so many different ways. I mean, could you share, basically an example of maybe something you've experienced where, okay, whether it's the leadership is saying one thing, but you interpreted the data a different way, or could there actually be two ways to interpret it? Right? I mean, you've got challenges and things like that. Can you give an example maybe of some of that?
Yeah, I had a report come out one time for a crew of folks that I thought really did a great job. And there was a customer survey sent out and looking at, client satisfaction for the services offered. And the numbers just weren't impressive. And I knew the crews cared. I knew we had a good culture. And we had somebody new with this experience around customer satisfaction, surveying, building a business to that. Great idea, great goals. But unfortunately, in the denominator, or in the numerator, denominator, in the denominator of the how great was your service, and a lot of people said it was great, it was great, it was great. But in the numerator, they included the no response forms. So people that didn't reply. So we were only great 250 times out of 450 times, but only 300 people responded. And so, great intention, sent the wrong message. Well, we were going to retool the business. How can we do better for client services? And it just continued not to smell right. And that's what led to the dig in and say, really, let's break this down and understand why the numbers don't seem to match, or why we just seem to be a little off the rails here. So I'm always suspect, always, if validate, jump in, double check, because boy, you can drag some frontline folks around in a bad way if you're not careful.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, it is one of the things, even though it's, computer or device generated, it's still okay, trust but verify, right? Still
Right.
trust but verify. And in that, how does Fleet Fidelity, I mean, with all the data that we have from, ELDs to telematics to dispatch data to fuel consumption to vehicle maintenance, I mean, how does Fleet Fidelity help fleet or an individual within that organization make sense of the data so they don't, like you just explained, didn't get the answer they weren't looking for, but they really did if they look behind the layers of the onion, right? Peel back the layers of the onion.
Correct. The sad truth is, I don't think there are any great shortcuts. And what that means is nowadays, and I've got a few years, little, what do they call, short at the tooth, long at the tooth, right? We used to scrape for data. Where can we get data? Anything that indicates performance out there. And over the 30-year history or so, now we're flooded with it, right? Flooded in so many ways to slice it and dice it. And I don't think there's any way to shortcut identifying what matters to you for your performance of running your business. What are those top level measures? KPIs are the typical terminology, right? And then go a deeper step and say, what behaviors, what measure points can we look at that build those results that we want to achieve, and work backwards like that a little bit. But you have to dig in at that lowest level of data, that signal of performance, right? And you just need to validate it. Is it measuring what you think, the way you think, at the frequency you think, and build on solid foundation, build the next layer up, and get to that system from top to bottom, that you've done the due diligence. And I think you mentioned Fleet Fidelity. That's a Yahara offering out there. We don't want to make this too much of a commercial today, but the Fleet Fidelity was built because when we went and visited fleets to work on video feedback systems or whatever, custom projects, they would always pull out 3 pages of spreadsheets where they put all the data that really mattered to them from now these many systems that were out there helping them, critical systems, helping them run their business, that didn't talk to each other, right? And so Fleet Fidelity is an attempt to get all your data in one place, give you control over configurability, et cetera. So that, just to lay the groundwork of that framework that you referenced there. And the key, automate the collection of it, automate the collection of it from the various systems, and then do your work to validate it, to make sure that it's a one-to-one coming across the application APIs. That's how systems talk to each other, application programming interface, and validate that data, get a good stream of it. You've always heard bad data in, bad data out. This is a key step. You do that upfront work, you are on a good path now to start from a better point than throwing reports out to the crew and saying, hey, we got a new system and here's what it's showing. Everybody shape up. Listen, we're speeding. Oh, wait, we don't count speeding under 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. And our system is counting all of those 0 to or 1 to 5 miles an hour over. So it looks like a failure in the one system, in the report. But when you dig in, it's like, well, 80% of the speeding aren't coached. We're choosing not to coach. So it's unfair to say that's performance that wasn't met. So sorry, another spattering of where these examples come from, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, it's great. I mean, you mentioned a term that I haven't heard in a while, was scraping data. And I remember we used to have to scrape data from the FMCSA to get CSA scores. And then there was a certain um, electronic log provider that they would just send you tons of data and you would have to scrape out what you needed. And so I think it's safe to say that um, data in general has gotten a little bit better at being able to put in specific silos, but you still have to know what you're looking at and what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And the problems that you're trying to solve. So, with that, I mean, if a fleet is really just starting to embrace, and I do find it just, on an editorial note, I do find it interesting that, trucking is one of the last great industries to embrace technology kind of wholeheartedly, right? And I think we're right in the middle of that movement. And so with that, I mean, what is if you've got a fleet that's just starting to really aggregate data and try to find those KPIs, what advice would you give to a fleet really just getting started?
Take a good look at what you got available, right? And I think get a sense of the effort it takes to collect it for the insight you're looking for, and that there needs to be a commensurate reward for that effort. You can't put somebody on a 3-hour task every week for a bit of data that you occasionally maybe pull into an equation or think about. And then if the data you really depend on, require, isn't there, then vendors want to serve. They want you to have a good experience with their product and stuff. And if you haven't got them on speed dial, it's probably a good idea to do so. And they can help with custom reporting. They can maybe put it on their roadmap in the future, or just recommend somebody to help solve the problem for you if it's critical to your business. I think the key part is get your team together, talk about it, model it. Are these the behaviors? Are these the measures that indicate the overall performance goals? Our ability to reach our overall performance goals we've agreed upon, and get that in place, right? Then expect to iterate. You're going to turn that crank, run those reports, get that data, and it's not going to be exactly as you thought. There's going to be a formatting problem. There's going to be a frequency problem. There's going to be misalignments. Maybe you don't have driver assigned to key pieces of information, et cetera. So you just have to be, somebody, I said this at the last webinar, to stay on top of everything, you have to be on top of everything. So you have to do the work up front, especially for the automation to work like it should, for the insights to be valid. So I'll just say, plan to do the upfront work, do it well, but expect that it's not going to be right. Run through those iterations and fine tune it.
I think it's great. I think that's a great advice. And you and I have crossed paths professionally before. And so, I think the next, part of that is we've both seen fleets be early adopters of data, some just getting into it. But for those that have kind of been on the data side and aggregated data, different marks, and kind of inspected what they expect, I mean, you obviously have to notice some point that they see a shift in kind of a paradigm shift in, okay, we're successful now because we've identified these issues, or like you alerted to earlier, we had these issues that we didn't think were issues, but they are, right? And they've been able to identify that. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on, the fleets that have taken that data and used that service and been able to learn from that and hit their performance metrics.
Right. So the ones I've probably been engaged with most is around safety. And no secret to anybody that's worked with me, I'm a big believer that video feedback is a great way to capture driver performance out there. Your thresholds on the device are set properly for when it triggers. It's 95% of the time, coachable behavior. You're not bogging folks down, nagging them for stuff that's questionable. And once you have that in place, solidify those measures, set those goals. And then, if you need to remediate and, in one of our projects, we had drivers with the fleet we were working with just telling us how we could not, and it was the bell curve, the speediest end of the bell curve, right? The ones who were having the violations and we couldn't really bring back into the fold of the expectation of the company. And they'd be going down a long hill and on a freeway, and they'd say, you just can't maintain that speed going down this hill. I got to be in the middle lane. I have to be going this fast. Well, first of all, 80% of the drivers at that fleet weren't having that same problem. So that makes you think maybe it's vehicle, maybe it's driver. We'll dig into that. But they're passing the safest brands on the planet. The big billboards on the sides of the truck there in the right-hand lane going 55 and a 55, passing them. Six different brands on one long hill one time. And it's like, what is it about your truck or your set of expectations that makes you so much different from these safest fleets that we know about in the country? So that was a good moment of bringing the drivers around to our expectations we believe are reasonable. Here's some evidence of why we believe it's reasonable, and helping those drivers notice the change. Perhaps it's a change in your culture, or you're doing a better job of infusing your culture out there, and having drivers come into that under that umbrella of this is how we operate, this is why we operate the way we do, etc.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example. And, I, like you, am a huge proponent of, you know, video-based safety, driver performance. And I'll just go ahead and throw this out there. When we talk about, in-cab video, it's both forward and driver facing. Because, if you really want data, that gives you a root cause, you might need to see what the driver's doing. So now I've made my stance public on that. So, but anybody who knows me knows that's been a has been a long belief, and I've seen it just been recognized time and time again. With all of the data that's out there, telematics, video, engine performance, MPG, and there's parts of metadata that could link all this together, even down to going back to the days of log auditing, paper logs, and manually checking against fuel purchases, right? But now we've got much more advanced systems and ways to do that. But with all this data that's out there, you can use it for you, like we've been talking about, but it could also be used against you in litigation, which we all know is an issue in the trucking space. But so how, what would be a best practice in saying, how long do I keep the data? How long do I keep it? I remember this one position I held as the director of safety, went in as the new guy and found like 4 years of DVIRs when you only have to keep them for 90 days. But with the data, and that was paper, but with the data, I mean, how long should you keep data so it will help you, but not hurt you in case of litigation?
Yeah, great point. And you are on top of one thing. What you have to keep it for as long as you have to keep it. So you need to be aware of that, because you don't want to be in a case where it appears you have destroyed data that is relevant to a claim, etc. Should you or should you not collect data from the beginning? And then video, in the early days of video feedback, that was a big concern. And the best companies that I worked with came to the opinion that it was better to know exactly what was going on, understand the root causes, address the root causes, and prevent the behaviors. And that prevention had far greater value than not having evidence of the facts that took place. The video augmented the facts from the scene, and the facts on the scene from observers, witnesses, law enforcement investigation against trucking, guess which way that typically tips? It tips
Yeah,
against trucking.
totally against trucking.
It
Absolutely.
tips against trucking. So you got a little bit of an advantage from the beginning that the truth that comes from the camera is going to be better than the truth from the evidence, the witnesses, etc. The key, though, the absolute key is your process. Do you have it documented? How long do you keep the videos? What do you do with them? Do you have a track record of coaching events that need coaching? Or do you let coachable behaviors that were documented in the system go uncoached? If your company is not ready to act on the data you have, there is risk there. And you probably need to shore up some other areas before you bring on additional risk like that. But boy, get your processes, your ability to lead, control of your organization, your communication channels, and build on top of that the systems that expose you perhaps to having data on hand that could harm you. Can't beat the prevention. Can't beat the prevention. Truth be known is good. And the reality too is when you are at fault, typically there's no jury seeing that video. You are settling soon, early, and at a less expense.
Yeah, and you hit on some great points there. One especially is, you have to have the mindset, the buy-in to be able to handle that data to start with. But I think another key important part there is to have a policy, a procedure, a workflow to be able to handle that data. And I know for, some companies that I've worked with in the past, they were mid-sized companies, so they like you said, some data you have to keep for a certain amount of time. So logs being one of them, 6 months. So it was just easier for them to delete their video data on the same retention schedule as their log data, unless there was a court case pending or something like that, right? And so I think that's a real important part, and I think that's one of the things that that your company can do when you look at that data is help you with the scoping out of a data retention policy and just maybe in a general policy as well.
Right. I think the having the process design, the operating guidelines written, and then following them is so critical.
I couldn't agree more because it's almost as bad as if you don't follow them, it's almost as bad as not having a policy. At least that's been my experience in the past.
Yeah, no doubt. What did there was something that crossed my mind a little bit ago too. Oh, the adopting new technology systems, trialing it, certainly recommended with a group of drivers. Understand the selection process for the drivers that are going to trial it. You want to have the easiest folks trial it. You want to have some of the hardest folks trial it, right? And because you're going to get a little bit different amount of feedback. And I think what you really have to be aware of is the change a net negative or is the change a net positive? Because parts of it will probably be positive, parts of it will probably be negative compared to the old system, the old way of doing things. So you really have to focus on, as a human, I can go with net positive. I'll put in more effort for more reward, more convenience, more efficiency, right? But if what you're doing benefits you entirely because you need better record keeping or something, and then now you've doubled or tripled my documentation time requirement, you've inadvertently made me log into 2, 3, 4 different systems to record what I need to record, whereas before I could put everything under one login. Those are the things that can make or break a rollout, because if you tip over to the net negative, look out for the resistance that can be generated, especially from the informal leaders in the group that have, especially if they bring it up, they say it's a problem and they feel like they weren't listened to. What are they going to do if they don't feel like they were listened to?
Yeah, and I think that's and just to back up on that just a little bit, is that I think before you roll out any program, y- you cannot over communicate what you're doing or what you're trying or what you're going to do, whether it's a different data collection or whether it's video telematics, whatever it might be, a new policy. You just from a driver perspective, and like I said, I've never been an over the road driver, but in my experience on this side, I mean, you just can't over communicate enough. And then the group that that tested, whatever it is, you always want to look for that champion in that group when if your success is good and you come to a fleet-wide, company-wide rollout, you want those people to be champions, even though, they're not the boss or they're not the supervisor. You want them to, and we've all seen that as you get those guys that then sometimes you get lucky. It was the biggest naysayer to start with is your biggest cheerleader 3 months down the road, right?
That's a win, right? That is a win
Absolutely.
when the toughest become your advocate. I think too, there's an opportunity to get a good test of your culture is as you roll out something new and you do it well, and maybe you involve them in the selection process and it was meaningful. It wasn't just here, look at these things, tell us your opinion. We're gonna let you have an opinion. We're probably gonna ignore it. That can work in a backwards direction for you. But the test of your culture that I've seen is when management is talking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, when we're doing it, and somebody raises a hand with a little resistance from the crowd, and a peer speaks to the reason, speaks to the value, and they're defending leadership's direction and position, right? That's a validation of your culture that is very, very powerful. So it makes me a little emotional to that's the type of leadership, that's the type of leader people want to be. That's the goal you're trying to get to, right?
Absolutely. And I think that comes to, and we've seen this shift and it still needs to be um, ever present. And we've seen a shift, but it used to be the only time you talked to a driver or the only time they expected to hear from you was when they were on the hook for bad behavior. And we've done a better job. And I think, not only, you know, data, but video telematics and other things has now made it easier to recognize and compliment that driver. And it doesn't even have to be anything formal, but I think that has made it, to your point, that has made it just, oh, I'm getting a call from dispatch. What do they want now?
Yeah.
Or the safety manager goes, okay, the CEO who never talks to me now wants to know something. Why? And so I think we've done a lot better in being able to adopt and share that communication, like we talked about early, openly, both the good and the not so good. But I think we've seen a pretty good step, if you'd agree, in the past couple of years at recognizing the good, as well as some of the at-risk behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me ask you, in your experience, what has been a key failure? What have you seen done that, maybe with good intention that just ended up having a negative impact on an adoption of new technology or a new system?
Well, I think to sum it up, and I can think of one in particular, is they went into it with not only false expectations, but they didn't really know what their issues were to begin with. And you touched on that earlier, right? I don't know if they could have spelled KPI, to be honest with you. Um, and even the short term version, but that was the deal. They were just, and they were told by their insurance company to do something,
Yeah,
and with very little experience and leadership, they tried to do something and it fell flat on their face. And then it was a all hands on deck trying to figure out how we get out of this mess that we just spent a significant amount of time and money getting into. I
right.
think that's probably the biggest failure, and I can think of several examples, but one in particular that I've seen.
Yeah, very good. Very good. I think that I'm trying to think if we didn't cover what was promised in the invitation we sent to folks here. I don't have much more to offer to today's conversation, I don't think. And if you have a question in the audience there, please pop it in here as soon as you can, because we'll be winding down over the next 2-3 minutes, I imagine. Uh, thoughts on your end, Steve, as I look at what's popping in right now?
I think the one thing, and this is, whatever you're using, and it kind of goes back to um, the whole topic of the webinar is that, sometimes baby steps are required, and then but always open communication, and then sometimes you do have to kind of take that leap of faith, but in the right direction, right? I would much rather, now with my age being long in the tooth, as you said before, I wouldn't even really rather jump off my bed than a cliff. I'd rather not jump off either one of them. But but
Right.
that would be the main thing, is that you have so many people that you're trying to accommodate, yet you're also trying to run a business. And but you just can't over recognize someone's good works enough. And then like you said before, be able to address things with data that's been verified, and
Gotcha.
that you know what
Gotcha.
you're looking at. That would be
Yeah.
my summation. Yes.
Gotcha. Great. But we did get a couple questions in. Let me look at the first one here and summarize it a little bit. So I think this question, the great to hear about the best way to implement. Do you handle maintenance? Does Fleet Fidelity handle maintenance, and does it handle coaching? And so the Fleet Fidelity platform is agnostic. Whatever you want to bring in, whatever you say matters to your performance monitoring that contributes to your KPIs, data can be brought in from your maintenance tracking provider. A great example of this strategy, and this strategy works in an additional way that I think is really important. Within your company, sometimes there's competition for resources, right? Between the finance group, accounting, ops, safety, you name it, right? And one of the things that maintenance data can do is help you independently validate the investment you've made in perhaps safety, technology, operational efficiency, technology, et cetera. And I say independent, meaning that if you can, for example, if you have aggressive driving as one of your problems, close following, speeding perhaps, and you're going to really, that you've identified, we want to improve those areas. We put them in our KPIs. There are maintenance indicators that are independent of the count of or the driver aspect of it out there in the talking to them, looking at the data. You bring in the cost per mile and look at the change over cost per mile of suspension parts, of tires, of brake pads, the brake repair work you do, right? If you have limited variables over a 6-month period of time where you've implemented a new strategy, a new program to address jackrabbit driving, fast corners, etc., you should see independently a change in that cost per mile on the maintenance side, and that is a data stream that can be brought into the Fleet Fidelity paradigm, built into the KPI side of it, as a independent indicator, I'll say. Have you seen such?
Oh yeah, and that's, yeah. I mean, it goes back to, if you're hard on a truck, then you're probably, I mean, if you're constantly repairing tires or suspensions, or anything mechanical more than the average of your fleet, and maintenance has come a long way with collecting data and using it as
Right.
well, right? But you rest assured that there's probably some at-risk behaviors that's taking place that you're not identifying or coaching on, because the parts are meant to last for a certain amount of time under certain conditions, and if the rest of the fleet, except for 10%, is performing at standard,
Yeah.
yet you're constantly replacing tires and brakes on one truck or two trucks, then you're there's some underlying issues there you need to look at.
Correct. One more question. how do you view benchmarking? It seems that data sets are challenging and leadership wants to compare to something. So what I think fleet should pay attention to is, and you don't have to go back, I'd probably go back a little more than 10 years, and big data. Big data was a catchphrase in a topic, right? Big data, we're going to learn so much from. And being involved with trucking associations, et cetera, let's share our data and let's do some benchmarking. And so we have something to compare to. And there are groups out there that have overcome hurdles and figured out how to do that. As a vendor, though, I think vendors started to adopt, we need to standardize the way we handle our data so that we have a view into big data. If we standardize the severity of indicators for driver performance, if we standardize the selection of behaviors that we care about, in the long run, we're going to have this broad fleet view of data and have this data that matters. We're going to provide these great insights. That came at the cost of trucking companies not getting things the way they wanted, right? They're kind of beholden to the vendor's decision of how they wanted to weight things, what things they wanted included and excluded. At Fleet Fidelity, that was one of the problems we were addressing. We are not doing things in a way with big data as the primary. Big data in this case, meaning multiple clients' data aggregate, de-identified, sure, but aggregated together to give us some future, pot of gold, if you will. Not part of our strategy. Our goal is to give each of the clients the data the way they want the data. What you include, what you don't include. At a swipe of the mouse, click of the button, include it. Next minute you say that's a bad idea, change it, go back to where you were without breaking anything. And so we've had really good response from our clients that, thank you, finally. I probably abused this slogan a little bit. Our bread trucks don't cause us the same amount of risk as our fuel tankers do when we go around a corner too fast. And we really want to talk to the tanker drivers when they're going around a corner too fast, if you will. But so what does that leave you with? In the end, I believe what that is, when it comes to benchmarking, you can now take the participants in the trade group, the industry advocacy group, and they want to do a benchmarking. You can de-identify the data, bring it together with its variability in it, and then you can map to standardized ways, bigger buckets. These are inattention events. These are aggressive driving events. This is a category of maintenance we've done well, and this is a different category, right? So you get out of the weeds and up to a higher level view, and that's where you can now start aggregating data from different places and seeing if there are trends and insights, and then that benchmark becomes an availability. But I think it's unreasonable to think that multiple companies within a vertical will do things the same way to allow for good data in.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, based on my experience with a couple of those super fleets that you mentioned earlier, that actually do benchmark with each other. I mean, there's no secrets in safety, right?
Right.
There may be in operations and all that kind of stuff, but in that particular portion of it, that's where I think we really, like you mentioned, getting specific to certain company, and not just looking at big data and how does that affect me, because a 50 to 100 truck fleet is going to be totally different than a 2,000 to 3,000 truck fleet.
Absolutely. And the opportunity is different for what you can do with your data between us. Certainly. All right, Steve, thank you so much for making the time to join us today. I appreciate the interrogation, and I'm hopeful that the answers are helpful to the audience. And to the audience, if you're still hanging on, you're going to get a link to this content. We'd love it if you shared it with people you think would gain some value from the content we covered today. And you'll be getting an invitation to the next in the series of these webinars. Probably within a week or two, you'll start seeing what our next topic is and be able to save the date and time for that. I think that concludes it, and much appreciate your time you committed to our conversation today. Have a great day.